Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Morgan Hill Real Estate Analysis for June of 2023. My name is Robert Whitelaw. I'm a local real estate broker, member of the National Association of Realtors, serving the local Silicon Valley area since 1988. Hoping to bring you some information that might help you make better decisions in today's market. Now, as always, we like to take a look at the most recent month so we can figure out where we've been, where we are, and where we might be going throughout the rest of the year. So let's go ahead and jump in and take a look at what's been going on with Morgan Hill for June of 2023. Now, in terms of total number of active listings, we can see that the numbers are down for Morgan Hill by about 43.8% or 44% if we round up a little bit. Last year, that number stood at 105 total homes on the market. And just to calibrate you to what this is, the total active number of homes available in the month, just as a measurement of the number of homes buyers had to choose from and the number of homes that sellers were competing with to get attention of buyers. We can see it's been a big dramatic decrease from the same time last year, but what's interesting is it's been relatively flat since January. So really no increases. In fact, between May and June, same number, 59 homes on the market in both May and June of 2023. Another interesting thing to note is we've got 1.3 months of inventory. I know I've mentioned this before, but on average nationally, it's 4.5 to 6 months, 5.5 months, in that range in terms of what's considered a balanced marketplace. And obviously, the lower the number for months of inventory, the lower the supply, right? And what that number means is if we froze the number of homes that sold this month and froze the inventory at that number. So in other words, if we locked it in at 59 and didn't add any more homes, how long would it take us to sell off all of those homes with current number of homes sold number? And that gives us 1.3 months. So we're far below anybody's number. I mean, I know normally for me, I consider a locally healthy number in terms of month of inventory to be about 4.5 months. So keep that in mind. We are at a point where if anything changed it on the demand side, if we had a big drop in interest rates, for instance, where buyer demand really jumped, we would see this market lean further into being a seller's market. And right now, in many areas, we are seeing numbers that indicate we are still in a seller's market. Not true everywhere. We'll look at what the overall numbers are. But keep in mind that so many of these communities like San Jose, even Morgan Hill, which is a much smaller community, it is all about the hyper local reality. I was looking at homes over the weekend, and there are some neighborhoods that are clearly going to see homes selling for way over asking price. And then there are other areas that are just slightly less desirable that are not going to see that kind of attention. They're going to sell for listing price or even a little bit less. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and jump in and take a look at the next set of numbers. And as always, we look at how many homes were listed in the month of June of 2023. We can see that it's down 43%. Last year, we saw 87 homeowners decide to become home sellers. This year, that number was down to 50, and it was down from last month's May of 2023 number of 65 homes added to the market. Now, we can see last year in April is when we peaked in terms of the total number of homeowners that decided to become sellers. Remember also that March is when interest rates started their increase, and they gradually increased right up into July, August, and September, where I believe they peaked in October, November. But you can see there was a really dramatic drop-off after June as the market really just cooled and fewer sellers decided to go onto the marketplace. The reason for that, many of the folks I talk to who've been considering selling their home say it's because if I become a seller, I become a buyer and I have to buy a home somewhere. So for those folks who weren't planning on selling their home and then using the proceeds to buy outright their next property, the prospect of selling a home where they've got a 2.5% or 3% interest rate and then taking on a 7% interest rate on a new home on whatever balance they might carry just isn't attractive to them. It's not something that they typically want to do. So we can see that in terms of the buildup, we had an increase from a really general increase from December all the way up to May with a decrease in June. It's going to be difficult to really gauge this year compared to last year in terms of month-to-month trends because we had such a dramatic change in interest rates during that time period last year. But where do I think new listings are going to go? Well, if we sort of embrace the classical ideas of when homes tend to get listed, we've already hit the peak. So normally January, February, March, the first quarter of the year is when we start to see those homes get listed because folks want to get sold during that prime time of the year, what's considered the selling season. So my guess is from here, we're going to see a continuing decline in the total number of homes listed. Okay, next, let's go ahead and take a look at the total number of homes sold in Morgan Hill for June of 2023. This number is also down. It was 57 homes last year, 45 homes this year for a 21% decline. As we can see from last year's number, we hit our peak in April, and then we sort of had a steady a few ups and downs, but also remember sample size is a big influencer here. You tend to see more fluctuation in data as you're going with smaller sample sizes. So if you sort of even this out in your mind, you can see we have a peak at April of 2022 that sort of bottoms out in January of 2023 and then starts its increase from there. In terms of what do we expect to see happen after June, my guess would be that the number drops simply because that's what we saw last year, and that is normal. Typically, we will have hit the peak already by now in April and May. June is obviously not competing with April and May in terms of overall numbers relating to homes sold. So my guess is we are from here in a steady decline until we hit January and December 22 of 2020. December of 2023 and January of 2024. So this should be it for the year. For the rest of the year, we should consider ourselves having already hit the peak of total homes sold. Now, if we take a look and compare this, the total number of new listings versus homes sold, we can see that we added 5 homes to the inventory overall in Morgan Hill with the total number of homes versus the total number of homes listed. We had 45 homes sold and we had 50 homes listed. So clearly we're listing more than we're selling. What's interesting about that is obviously as you accumulate and the inventory gets bigger, we're going to start to see a little bit more demand put onto sellers to get the attention of buyers, and that may spell price reductions down the road. Next, let's go ahead and take a look at the total number of homes pending. This represents the number of homes that had an offer accepted. Now, we just talked about sold, but sold's an interesting number. While it's reported in June, the offer that was accepted for that sale came a month before or even 2 months before that. So May is probably when these homes had an offer made on them that they accepted. So this is a way for us to try and anticipate what we're going to see next month. And we can see it was a very big drop from May. If we look at May of last year, we saw between May and June, again, that was a normal thing last year. But again, remember the interest rate situation we were facing. However, if we again just embrace the classical ideas in your typical year, it is normal to see this sort of a drop in the total number of homes pending. But that should be a big indicator. Now, we saw in May, we had 55 homes sold and 55 homes went pending. This month, we had 45 homes sold. So 10 fewer homes sold than had offers accepted last month. That probably just means those homes have 30 to 45 day escrows and they closed and the offer was accepted late in the month last month. So we'll probably see those accumulate in July's data. But it's interesting to note the dramatic drop in the number of homes that we saw go pending, because that also indicates we're going to see a pretty dramatic drop in the number of homes that go sold in July. And I would expect that to be the case. And I would expect that to, as this graph kind of indicates, as we see once we get to June, July, August, everything just drops right until we hit December and January. And I expect to see the same thing this year for the rest of 2023. So now we're going to take a look at average original list price. We can see that expectations were down from the same time last year. That is good news. On average, home sellers in Morgan Hill were expecting to get 8.4% less than they got a year ago. And that tends to reflect the reality that we've seen in the market. And that's one reason why I like to share this number. As original list price, this is what the list price of the home was the day it went on the market. So this is what the seller's expectation was when they listed the home. This doesn't include any price increases or decreases. This is just what they originally listed it for. So this gives us a peek into the minds of the sellers to say, what are their expectations? And in looking at this, we can see they are more calibrated than they have been in the past. This number in past months has been crazy increases where on average sellers were expecting 10, 15, almost 20% in some cases more than the previous year. So this is a good sign. This tends to indicate we'll see fewer homes getting reduced prices as sellers are embracing the reality of the current market as we've seen it. In terms of where do we think things are going, because of the variation here, it's hard to call. I think what we'll see is sort of a general flatness. What I'm seeing here, despite the fact we have those peaks and valleys happening relatively quickly, which is a result of the sample size, right? One home that sells at a much higher price point can skew this graph up quite a bit. This is relatively flat performance, and I think we can expect to see the same. In terms of expectations of sellers, I think we can expect to see the same moving through the rest of the year. Now, as we take a look at sales prices, so this is what the home actually sold for. We can see that it's down 3.8%. So that's a nice mix, right? If we're seeing on average seller expectations being, let's see here, seller expectations being 1.489 million, and average sales price being 1.471 million, that's pretty close. So the discrepancy has narrowed quite a bit compared to past months where sellers' expectations were way out of whack. And the reason I mention that is that tends to indicate we're going to see fewer price reductions in the market in Morgan Hill. Now you can see last year, the average sales price was $1,529,751. That's 3.8% lower than last year. This year's number in June of $1,471,644, which has been a peak for the year. So June has ended up being one of the peak months. We tend to see April, May tending to be the peaks, but clearly there's been a lot of action. Now, anecdotally, I can also say I've seen more activity on the part of sellers out there. There are definitely some very qualified buyers poking around. I have a few that are also shopping right now. And as we get these properties coming on the market, they're selling more quickly. So those homes that represent the best of their variety, if you understand what I mean, right? If you have a bunch of 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, what's tending to happen is the very best of those 3-bed, 2-bath homes are tending to sell first as buyers are trying to get the maximum value they can out of their purchase. Next, let's go ahead and take a look at percent of list price. This gives us an insight into how much over or under asking price are buyers paying. Now, in calculating this, I am not looking at original list price. I am looking at what the list price was at the time the offer was accepted. So while we were looking into the seller's mindset before with their expectations on list price, now we're looking at what buyers are doing when faced with a specific price in that listing when they make their offer. And we can see we're still above 100%. Honestly, I expected us this month to see less. We actually had an increase between May and June of going from 100.1 to going to 102.5. Last year, that number was 103.5, so not very far off from last year. But in terms of actual numbers that buyers are paying and sellers are getting, that represents a pretty decent chunk of change when you're talking about average sales prices in the 1.4 million range. Now, that's down just 1% from the same time last year. We can see the trend is very clear this year. In January, we just really had increases up until May. My expectation, though, is that as with past years, because obviously the trend last year isn't hard to spot, and even if we discount 2022 because of the interest rate change, that's what tends to happen. We tend to see whatever the peak is in May and June, we tend to see a decline in this number as we go out through the year. My expectation would be that we see this continuing to decline as we go through the year. And it wouldn't surprise me if at some point, as we accumulate more and more inventory, because remember, as I mentioned, we accumulated inventory in June to the tune of, what was it? Was it 15 homes or 5 homes? It was 5 homes in Morgan Hill. In San Jose, that number was 89, and the county overall was 180. In every city, we've seen a net increase in inventory in the month of June. So as that number increases and the inventory rises, meaning the supply rises, we're going to tend to see folks having to react to that by reducing prices, or buyers simply coming in with lower offers that are going to have to end up getting accepted. Okay, which would obviously push this number down. So, long way of saying my expectation is that this number remains flat or lower as we move through the rest of 2023. Next, let's go ahead and take a look at days on market. This is how long it took to get a home sold. We can see this number is up 44% in Morgan Hill for June of 2023. Last year at this time, it was 16 days. This year, June of 2023, it's 23 days, again for a 44% increase. Where do I expect this to go? Well, last year we saw after June, things got crazy in terms of increasing numbers. Now, July of last year was interesting because the reason why that number jumped so much in July of last year was existing inventory of homes that have been on the market longer got sold quickly because the response to those increased interest rates was while they were increasing. And remember, it didn't all happen at the flip of a switch. March saw an increase in interest rates that then proceeded all the way through to, say, October, November, where we hit our peak in total increase in interest rates. And a lot of folks seeing that anticipated rates continuing to go up and made those purchase or those offers in June, which then closed in July. So we saw a lot, and also it was the hottest time of the year, right? May and June tend to be the hot times of the year. That's when the market's hitting. So seeing a sell-off of homes that have been on the market longer made sense last year. This year, we'll see if that happens again in July. I would anticipate a bit of an increase. Interest rates have really fluctuated right around 7% for a while now, with some increases and some decreases. But we'll see how that plays out. My expectation is that this number will be about the same in July, maybe a little bit increased, but from here on out, it should go up right until we hit December. Obviously, last year we had an exception in October when it went down a little bit, but the trend from here should be up as we head through the end of 2023. Next, total number of price reductions. In the month of June of 2023, 32% of the inventory in Morgan Hill had a price reduction. That makes sense as homes that have been on the market for much longer finally realized in order to compete in the market, they had to reduce their price. Last month, that number was 28. So I think this is a thing you would expect to see as we exit the summer season, right? June. Sellers are seeing, listen, whatever is happening in the marketplace, the highest number of buyers are going to be out there in the market right now. And we start to see a decline in buyer demand as we exit summer, as we head into the months when school starts, for instance. The number of folks out there looking to buy drops. So this is a logical point, whether it was brought up by their real estate agent or sellers brought it up themselves. An increased number of homes had a price reduction to respond to the fact they wanted to try and get sold before the end of this season. Year over year, that is a 53% decrease from the number of homes that had price reductions. If you remember these market reports I did from a year ago, we had some pretty dramatic price reductions. We had some communities with over 50% of the homes having a price reduction. So I think that this is healthier, obviously, than last year. It's always better to come into a market more calibrated. But from here, the perspective right now, today, if you are a seller, you need to work to make your home, and you need to get sold, right? If it's discretionary for you and you don't need to get sold this year, maybe you don't make a change. But if this is something that has to happen for financial reasons for you, I'm going to suggest that you reduce your price now so that you aren't losing more money later, because I think there's a good probability that what your home is worth today is going to be a little bit less in a few months. So better to make that adjustment now. All right. That should just about cover it for Morgan Hill for June of 2023. Now, of course, July of 2023 is going to be coming up. We've got the Coffee and Real Estate live chat coming up on Saturday, August 19th at 10 a.m. You can find that on Facebook and YouTube if you want to participate in the chat. It's absolutely interactive for folks who want to show up and ask their questions or respond to data that we cover. So make sure to join me. You can get all the lowdown on it at my website, soldbyrobert.com. Just scroll down a little bit and you'll see a link to it. You'll see the video is actually embedded right there. So if you want to watch it right there on the website, you can watch the YouTube version of it embedded right there on the site. And of course, if you would like to get an instant home valuation for your property, feel free to, at the top of that same page, soldbyrobert.com, on the left-hand side, just enter your address and it's instant. There's no gates, no nothing. You'll get a great breakdown with tons of other information that I think is super valuable for all homeowners to be aware of. And of course, you can subscribe to that so that you get that update every month. So make sure to check that out. And if you want to start your home search, same page, soldbyrobert.com, on the right side, you can get your search kicked off. You can pick the area. You can obviously, whether it's a single family residential, townhome, condominium, and we can work together to help find for you the perfect property for you. All right, folks, the goal is always to leave you with more knowledge on the table than I take up in your time. Absolutely hope we've achieved that today. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to y'all next time.